The connection between Iron Man and Doom is far deeper than many initially believe. The casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Victor Von Doom is one of the most earth-shattering casting decisions in the history of the MCU and film. The fact that Robert Downey Jr. was specifically chosen to portray one of the most iconic villains in Marvel's pantheon speaks volumes about Marvel's plans and the intricate link between Tony and Doom, especially in the comics. So today, let's talk about the casting decision, why it was so precise, and what it may mean for the future of the multiverse moving forward. Today we'll be talking about the time that Doom actually became Iron Man and attempted to reinvent himself as a force for good in the world. And while we aren't saying that Doom will be outright a hero in the MCU, we think that it's vital that we talk about the elephant in the room, which is the double casting of RDJ. Despite what the name might suggest, infamous Iron Man is actually Victor Von Doom after the events of Secret Wars, as well as constructing Battlefield, which we know are about to unfold very soon, where Doom actually decided to reinvent himself again. In Secret Wars, Doom became a tyrant who presided over the remaining patchwork reality known as Battleworld. But after Battleworld, Doom would evolve even further. He eventually found himself unfulfilled, as nothing he could do on Earth would ever live up to the height of his power when he had the abilities of the Beyonders. This actually led Doom to reconsider his life choices and wonder if he may actually achieve the same level of fulfillment and purpose from being a force of good, appointing General Karadik as a temporary head of state, which he believed would help Latveria eventually transition into a more democratic nation instead of a monarchy. With this, Doom put down his suit of armor and went to find Tony Stark. Tony, who was in the process of handling Madame Mask, who had been possessed by a demon. With Doom's help, Tony was eventually able to exorcise the demon, and he and Doom eventually became allies moving forward, despite Doom previously being a villain. With the Second Civil War breaking out, Rhodey was an unfortunate casualty that caused Tony to spiral downward, and Doom was actually a voice of reason that helped Tony cope with the loss of his dearest friend. After Stark himself fell into a coma not long after, Doom understood that his new objective was clear. In Stark's absence, he constructed his own suit and took up the mantle as Iron Man. This commenced a long, winding road of redemption and trust, with both Mephisto and S.H.I.E.L.D. lamenting Doom's attempts to make amends for his past crimes. S.H.I.E.L.D. attempted to apprehend him on several occasions now that he had surrendered the throne of Latveria, and therefore was no longer protected by diplomatic immunity. Even Mephisto used Doom's own mother to torment him on his crusade, but he was in for the long haul here. Doom had changed. Not only were the heroes of Earth hesitant to address his new mission, but the villains of Marvel were furious at his turn to the side of light. Many of these villains had trusted or confided in Doom on several occasions, and they were furious that he would join their enemy, so Doom collected an array of adversaries on both sides of the aisle. One villain was known as the Hood, and went as far as to stage a counterattack on Doom. To do so, he set up his own team of nefarious villains, who all wanted to see Doom pay for his treachery. After a series of long and tiresome battles, Doom made his final stand against the Hood and the demon that possessed him, fighting like a demon himself to help Tony keep his grip on Stark Industries. By this point, Tony Stark had recovered, but his company was under siege by the Hood and his allies, and Doom put everything he had into helping Tony maintain control over the empire that he had spent so long building. While he was occupied with the burden of becoming a hero, Latveria had also fallen into ruin. The regime was worse than ever, with a complete tyrannical hold being levied against his homeworld since the inauguration of the general that Doom had put in his place. The leader of the resistance movement of Latveria, a woman by the name of Zora Vukovic, encouraged Doom to rise up against the new authority and take back control of Latveria. As bad as Doom was, he did care for the prosperity of his people under his regime, and his efforts as a hero had led many to wonder if he could actually become a benevolent and an understanding ruler. Doom, now with a new spark of encouragement, was able to imbue Zora with the power cosmic, but his personality was already beginning to slip away. He had fought to turn himself into a beacon of prosperity and truth, but under the surface, his latent personality was beginning to chip away. Doom again began to revel in power, and slowly digressed back to his old ways. After aiding the resistance, Doom sought to capture Galactus within the confines of Mount Doom, and his intention was to siphon Galactus' own power in service of Latveria. At this point, Doom's motivation still seemed righteous, as capturing Galactus would have been an unparalleled good for the galaxy. Not only would it see an end to Galactus's hunger and the destruction of countless worlds, but Doom intended to create an energy source from the interstellar entity. He wanted to provide clean energy to not just Latveria, but the world at large, doing away with fossil fuels and crippling the rate of pollution. With the help of none other than the Fantastic Four, Doom was successful in doing so, until he turned around and arrested the team for trespassing in Latveria. By this point, Doom's true personality was showing through again, and he vowed to execute the Four on live television as penance for their crimes. This shows us that even when Doom attempts to turn over a brand new leaf, his desire for power and his bottomless greed will always cause him to slip back into his old patterns, and now we know why. Doom never wanted to become a hero because he was morally righteous. He wanted to become a hero because he thought it might stroke his own ego and lead him to feeling important again. All he wanted was to satiate a lust for importance, and he thought that by being a hero he could achieve this. But even Doom cannot fight back against his own nature, his greatest gift and his greatest curse. But now that we've talked about the time that Doom became Iron Man, let's touch on the most notable time when Iron Man became evil. The reason why we think this is important to talk about is because Tony and Doom are more similar than either of them would care to admit. Doom is something of a dark mirror of what Tony could be if he wasn't constrained by the same moral code that he has. If Tony ever wanted to do away with his heroism and initiate a new world order in his image, he would bear a striking resemblance to Doom. Both are driven by ambition and hubris. They each have an inflated ego, but only one has ever considered a hero, and it's only because in the MCU, Tony recognizes that he has these flaws. In the first Iron Man, we saw Tony coming to terms with the fact that his company had caused destruction and calamity across the world, and his entire arc in the MCU was dedicated to retribution and redemption for this. In one instance, however, Tony's morality was inverted after the Axis event. During the Axis storyline, the moral compasses of some of Marvel's most famous heroes and villains was inverted through magical intervention, and Tony was one of the heroes affected. Rather than being cured, he would eventually shield himself from the inversion, so while everyone else was set back to normal, Tony remained a morally apathetic version of his former self. This brought out the darkest of Tony Stark's character, straight to the surface. His egomaniacal need for power, his compelling desire to push the limits of science and technology even to the detriment of others, and most of all, a disregard for anyone that may be caught in the shadow of his actions. These aren't new personality traits of Tony Stark, and it was revealed that the Axis didn't put anything in Tony that wasn't already there. It just took his darkest desires and stripped away the safeguards that he had put in his own mind. Tony Stark was unleashed, done holding himself back. This is the version that became a terrifying depiction of what Tony could have become if he had wanted to, and as we come to find out, he is a lot like Doom. He released the Extremis 3.0 virus into the civilian population, but he didn't want to kill anyone, he just wanted them to become addicted. Tony created a whole population that was unable to live without his continual updates and upgrades, for which he charged them $100 a day. He forcefully took over multiple rival corporations and launched positive ad campaigns praising the effects and necessity of the Extremis virus. And he transformed his own technology into a legion of personal drones set to act as his own private military. Slowly he began to consume the world, not by force, but through sheer, unrivaled capitalism. We say this to highlight again just how similar the two characters are, and why Robert Downey Jr. was cast as Doom. For the first decade of the MCU, Tony was working to correct these personality flaws. He became a hero strictly because he understood how his mind and his ego were dangerous, and how they had been dangerous for so many years. This iteration of Doom is going to likely be everything that Tony could have become. It will glimpse into what may have happened if Tony did not learn to care for those around him and didn't have the desire to become a hero. What could happen if Tony was truly amoral, and how dangerous could he be? A threat to the whole multiverse? Absolutely. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Doom's entrance into the MCU, and the fact that he could be a Tony Stark variant? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel today, and as always, we will hopefully catch you in the next video.